Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard about the show Squid Game, and since Season 2 just came out, I thought it'd be a perfect time to talk about it. Obviously, the most interesting thing about Squid Game, though, are the death games that it makes the players go through for the cash prize, which turns normal Korean childhood games and activities into life or death challenges until literally only one single person survives. As a Dragonball channel, to do power scaling, combining Squid Game with anime is a bit difficult, given the story is entirely made up of completely normal people with no special powers or abilities. Unfortunately, even Kid Goku from the very first chapter of Dragon Ball would be able to survive every challenge with ease, but even if he somehow failed a game, he's literally bulletproof and can smash boulders with his bare hands. No amount of guards shooting at him are going to take him down. So we need to pick someone even weaker to make this hypothetical scenario work, and the closest thing we have to a normal warrior that exists in the Dragon Ball universe is the world champion himself, Mr. Satan. Would the greatest fraudster and the greatest warrior in the Dragon Ball universe survive the 6 original challenges of the Squid Game? Let's find out. If you do like this kind of stuff, make sure to like, subscribe, and let's jump right in. Like I just said, we'll be putting Hercule or Mr. Satan up against the games as well as the in-between events of the 33rd Squid Game, aka the Squid Game that occurs in Season 1 of the show, as the challenges do change each year. Firstly, we're going to quickly establish how Mr. Satan would work in the world of Squid Game, and then we'll be breaking down each of the 6 major games and events that occur between the games and how he would do in each of them. There are 2 ways to interpret how the scenario would work. Either Mr. Satan is teleported to the real world and is thus completely unknown by the other players of the Squid Game, or alternatively, the Squid Game is teleported to the Dragon Ball world so that all the participants would know who Mr. Satan is and believe that he saved the world from Cell and Majin Buu. I think this has a drastic impact on how the games would go, but to be 100% impartial, we will be going with the first scenario. Realistically, in the second scenario, all the other players would just do what Mr. Satan says, and he could use his clout to completely dominate the games. Still, the first scenario has its benefits as well. Hercule will be going into the challenge as a complete unknown, meaning his martial arts abilities and natural charisma will not be known from the start by the other players or even the wardens of the game. Also, if this wasn't obvious, Hercule is going to be able to speak and understand Korean. Doing mental gymnastics for a language barrier is just pointless. Also, we won't be worrying too much about the narrative implications of Hercule's involvement throughout the game. Any possible lineup of players from the show could happen with brand new people in the game, especially with how luck-based later challenges are. Also, feel free to come up with a reason for why Mr. Satan is participating in the Squid Game at all. Looking for a challenge, lost all of his money to gambling? Put down your favorite headcanon down below. With that understood, let's look at the first challenge. Red light, green light. Without a doubt, this initial game has become the most iconic challenge in all of Squid Game, which does make sense. Not only is the giant robot doll incredibly creepy, but as the first round, it is by far the most brutal challenge. In the 33rd Squid Game, more than half the players were immediately eliminated from this challenge, the 456 who initially joined getting cut down to only 201. But what does this challenge actually entail? Well, it's pretty simple. When the robot girl turns around and says the equivalent of green light, the players are able to run toward her. However, when she turns around and says the equivalent of red light, the robot begins scanning for movement. Any player caught moving during this period gets shot and is eliminated from the game. The goal is to reach the line of safety on the other side of the room within 5 minutes. So, can Mr. Satan get through? The most important thing to understand is that if the robot catches Hercule moving, he is cooked. With all the jokes about Hercule surviving slaps from Cell or hits from a Mega Shenron in GT, he obviously does not scale to these guys' full power. One of the most important plot points with Mr. Satan in the Majin Buu saga is that he does and can get hurt and shot by bullets, even when on guard in the anime version. So the snipers or any guns in game are a genuine threat to him despite his status as a world champion. But can he actually make it across? And the answer is probably yes. Even if Hercule isn't durable enough to survive bullets, he does have some very solid reaction time feats. In the same scene where he gets shot, Mr. Satan is able to partially react to and dodge a rocket-propelled grenade being fired directly at him. RPGs vary in speed, but can reach a top speed just below 300 meters a second, putting it about 50 meters per second below the speed of sound, meaning the world champ certainly isn't breaking the sound barrier, but he can get pretty damn close when pushed to the limit. What this does mean for red light, green light though, is that there is no way he's getting tripped up. In the show, a good number of the players in the game can clearly react to the doll turning around and saying red light, so he should be no different. Also, even ignoring his feats of personal strength that we'll get into in a moment, no random person is making him stumble. Hercule is 6'2" and weighs over 200 pounds, making him 7 inches taller than the average Korean man. This would make him incredibly difficult for someone to knock over or push down in the initial panic caused by the game, which is what leads to the deaths of most of the players ultimately. So suffice to say, Hercule could make it and move on to the second game. The second challenge of the 33rd Squid Game is completely different, and not really based on physical ability at all, the Honeycomb challenge. In this game, players pick a shape of an umbrella, circle, triangle, or star, and then are given a needle so that they can cut that shape from a honey candy. The main issue is that not all shapes are created equal, with triangles being the easiest, followed by the circle, then the star, and the umbrella being the hardest. The goal is to remove the shape from the candy, but if you break the candy in any way, you're done. Now, Hercule will be coming into this challenge with an inherent disadvantage, simply because he's not Korean and wouldn't have the background experience of eating these candies. Furthermore, this is a challenge of ingenuity, skill, and luck rather than strength. Get unlucky and you might just get a piece of candy that breaks easily, or pick the nearly impossible shapes and instantly lose. Now, there are many ways this scenario can go. Hercule might pick one of the easy shapes and just get through by poking normally, but if he does get a hard shape, he's not exactly out of luck. Firstly, Hercule isn't dumb, and is remarkably resourceful. Back in the Cell Saga, when confronted with impossible things before his very eyes, he did try to come up with reasonable explanations for them instead of just accepting them at face value, even if it was just to protect his image. He's also pretty crafty with his various schemes to kill Majin Buu initially. Either way, I don't think it's without reason that he could see other players licking the candy to soften it to more easily cut the shape. Plus, Hercule is a sweaty guy pretty consistently, and it was sweat that allowed player 456 to realize he could dampen the candy in the first place. What I'm getting at is that Mr. Satan probably makes it through, either through his natural luck in picking a good shape, or just his inherent craftiness if he gets a more challenging one. So let's move on. Special round. Now, while this is technically not one of the actual games in the Squid Game, it's a major event that leads to more eliminations. Of course, this was essentially just a battle royale in the living quarters where the participants were playing, where anyone could do anything to survive or eliminate the opposition, and I think Mr. Satan would do perfectly fine. If he's feeling cowardly, he can just dodge around the punches with his wild moves and antics. We've seen him do this with Kid Buu and even Spopovich, so he would likely get away from anyone trying to attack him. If he does go on the offensive though, there is simply no one beating him on a one-on-one. While his strength is definitely inconsistent, he can still lay people out pretty easily with just a couple hits. Either way, Mr. Satan definitely makes it through this one without a doubt. Thankfully, things continue to look up for the world champion. Tug of War. This might be the single most straightforward game in all of Squid Game. It's Tug of War. The remaining 80 players get divided into teams of 10, and then have a tug of war against each other where the losers are quite literally pulled off the edge to their death, bringing the total number of players down to 40. It's here where Hercule would absolutely and totally dominate the competition. Firstly, we should estimate the total amount of force pulled by a team on the rope. Thankfully, we can get an estimate from average human lifting strength, which is about 50 to 80 kilograms. For reference, absolute peak athletes and strongmen can lift nearly 550 kilograms. Assuming this full lifting strength is being applied to all 10 players on each side, then there would likely be anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 kilograms of force being applied by a team. Now, anyone familiar with Hercule would see where I'm going with this, as in the anime, we see Mr. Satan pull multiple buses at once. Now, pulling something is not nearly as impressive as lifting or destroying it, as even people in real life can pull planes and buses around, but in this instance, we actually are looking to see how hard Hercule can pull something. Depending on different factors, this makes Mr. Satan's lifting strength range anywhere from 5,000 kilograms all the way to 20,000 kilograms of force. In other words, Hercule could be competing against the 10 strongest people on the planet Earth by himself, and he would still easily match or even surpass them multiple times over. So Hercule pulls on the rope with one hand, and the entire other team is plummeting. So let's look at the final 3 games. Now, the marbles game is the most vague and most ambiguous challenge so far. The players have 30 minutes to play any game of their choice in which one player must get the other person's 10 marbles. It's really just impossible to say what would happen. Who would Mr. Satan's partner be? What game would they play? I will say this though, Mr. Satan does have a degree of charisma that makes people believe what he says. He goes on TV all the time talking about stories that never actually happened, and no one questions him. So whoever this partner is, I think it is likely Mr. Satan could convince them to do a game he would be more likely to win for whatever reason, especially one that may rely more on his physical ability. So unlike the previous games where I was essentially 100% certain he would likely win, this one is a genuine toss-up that generally favors the champ, but any prediction of specific details would encroach on writing a fanfiction, so let's just move on. Glass stepping stones. Once again, we have another challenge that is very much luck-based. In this game, players must cross a bridge with different glass panels. One of the panels is weak and will shatter when someone jumps on it, while the other will hold the person's weight. In other words, if you are determined to go first, you need to be insanely lucky or you are 100% screwed and will fall to your death. However, there are some strategies that can be employed, like pushing people ahead of you and holding everyone hostage by not going forward and threatening the deaths of everyone behind you. Now, obviously, Hercule won't be able to tell the difference between the panes of glass, so he'll be guessing like everyone else. Still, I think Hercule's ability to manipulate and motivate others alongside his physical strength will aid him greatly here. Obviously, no one is pushing Hercule and forcing him to go forward, so that won't work. So if Mr. Satan is in the front, he could definitely stall until someone else gets in front of him and goes for a jump. I also think he would definitely convince the other players to do so, if not just out of a sense of personal perseverance. Now, to be honest, I don't think the fall would necessarily kill Hercule anyway. After all, he got smacked this far into a mountain with very little damage. And I'm not sure what would happen if he did land on the ground mostly okay. Would they just leave him there? Would they shoot him? Let him climb back up as he technically didn't break the rules? I'm not sure. Of course, there's just the scenario where he gets the same position as one of the 3 players who did survive the game and just naturally wins. But either way, again, I think Hercule could pull through. Now, at the end of the game, all the glass explodes, and this ultimately is why player 67 dies as they get hit by this glass. Again, Mr. Satan would probably just react to this happening and dodge any glass like we talked about before, so he should be perfectly fine going into the final game, Squid Game. Ironically, the last challenge honestly has the least difficult topic to talk about. After all, the final game of the Squid Game is essentially just a one-on-one fight where you are technically playing a game on top of it. And simply put, Mr. Satan is beating anyone in a one-on-one fight. He can smash through 14 concrete tiles, punch through the metal side of a bus, and has martial arts attacks compared to real-life explosives. A guy with a knife simply isn't going to be a problem for him. So, to bring a complex topic to a simple end, can Mr. Satan survive the Squid Games? Absolutely. But the challenge would force him to actually use all of his talents, both from his physical abilities to his intelligence to his charisma. Now, could he win the 34th Squid Game? That's a question for another day. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. As always, thank you to my members who got to see this video early, and make sure to let me know how I was wrong in the comments down below. See ya!